Have you ever wondered if you can dehydrate vegetable stock? You can. Let me show you how. Hi folks, it's Darcy from the Purposeful and welcome back to my channel. We are going to learn to take vegetable stock and make it into a vegetable powder. That is a shelf-stable way of storing vegetable stock without having to can or freeze. Those of you who are hikers, backpackers, and campers can use this powder to create soup bases for anything you're doing without having to lug the extra bulk in making a meal. Those of you who have the desire to keep this on your shelf for long-term storage, you can also do this as well. We're also going to find out how to take the dregs of the vegetables that you use to make the stock from. You can dry those and create a vegetable powder as well to add to your normal vegetable powders. Okay, are we ready to get busy with some new vegetable stock? Now this stock is something that I just made out of the leftovers in my refrigerator. Some of the leftovers from the canning that I did yesterday to can vegetable stock. I'll leave a link to it so that you can see how to make it and then how to can it. So basically what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to do a quick rough chop of all of the vegetables that I have here. They don't have to be done in any certain order. They don't have to be done in any certain size. You're just looking for a rough chop of clean, dry vegetables. Clean vegetables. You need to make sure that there are no damaged or rotting vegetables in any of your stock. And yes, I could do a little better job of doing these individually, but I am just trying to get this roughed, okay? I don't care about pretty and I don't care about the same size. We're not worried about that right now. So I will have a link down below on how to do this, and I'll give you some recommendations on the vegetables that you should put in here and the ones that you shouldn't. The water also doesn't matter. If you have a stock pot full of vegetables, you're going to fill it up to the top with water and you're going to let it simmer. And one tip I can give you, if you're going to dehydrate this, part of the process of dehydrating a stock is that you have to simmer down the stock into a syrup if you want to cut down on your dehydrating time, especially if you don't have a lipped tray to use on your dehydrator to hold the liquid. So you can do a concentrated stock, and so that you wouldn't add a ton of water. You would maybe, like what I'm probably going to do today is I'm only going to do about half the stock pot of water. I'm going to do the entire batch of vegetables, and I'm going to have a really concentrated vegetable stock. So then when I dehydrate it, as I add the powder back to water when I'm going to use it, I can adjust the amount of powder to how much stock, how dense I want that stock to be at the end. Because again, when you're cooking, the ratios matter more for flavor than anything, because you're not working with the same kind of chemical reactions you do when you bake. So you can just adjust things as you need to. So I'm going to do a half stock pot to get some really concentrated vegetable broth. It will also cut down on the simmer time that I have to do when I'm getting this ready to dehydrate. Okay, basically I have about 20 cups of water. We're going to let this sit on the stove, simmering. You don't want it boiling, you want it good and simmering for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how long you want it to be. You're going to end up with vegetables that are like this. What I have here is yesterday's batch of vegetables. They're all really soft. There's very little real nutrition left in these because it's been leached into the stock water. But we're going to do something with these later too. If you want to do something with them other than just throwing them away, or if you don't have a compost pile or animals that you can feed them to, we're going to dehydrate these later too. But hold on for that. So this is what you can see in my stock pot. It's not quite full. It's probably a little over half, not quite 3/4. But this is going to simmer now for another hour to until it gets to the point that I like it. And then we're going to go for the next step. Quick addition, because I forgot to add this. A couple of bay leaves, a handful of peppercorns, and if you'd like, some salt. I choose not to salt this because I salt my dish at the end to control the salt better, but you can add salt if you want. I just wanted to add, when you're done, these vegetables are like super fork tender, falling apart when you pick them up. See, I can't even keep that on. Let's see if I can find something else that's for. These are going to be super, super tender, so you know that you've worked through it. Just so that you see how the vegetables turn out. Okay, so I am going to now strain my stock. And here we go. Now, if you want this to be more pure, like you don't want any of the sediment in there, you can actually strain this through some cheesecloth or through a cotton tea towel. Okay, so you see we have our nice rich broth. So you have some options. Now, we can dehydrate this, and we're going to. But if you don't have a dehydrator, and you don't have a canner so that you can't can this, you can't pressure can this, it would have to be pressure canned, you can freeze it. You can freeze it in any kind of container that you want to freeze it in. I got these super cool silicone freezing trays called Super Cubes. You can, right here. So you can freeze anything from soups to broth or anything in these squares. They make it easy to stack. They come, I don't know if you can see the designation in here, but it comes in, let me get back in the light, 1 and 2 cup measurements. And for me, I make a lot of soup that you cannot can. When I make soup or stews that I don't want to can, we only have a couple of servings left, but I don't want to leave them in the refrigerator. So freezing is a really good option for me. And I like that these are square. They stack better than if I do pucks. And they store better in my freezer in the space that I have without taking up a lot more room. So, because I'm messy, I always make sure that I fill this way because I will make a mess. So it's easy enough to use these if you wanted to do this, but you can use whatever you happen to have. If you prefer to store in flat zip top bags, that works well too. It's as easy as that. This particular one actually has a lid that you would then just throw this into your freezer and let it freeze. And then when you're ready, you just pop these out and store them like you would store them. But that's an option. But what we're here for is dehydrating. So what's going to happen is that we're going to basically take this broth and we're going to simmer it down until it is almost like syrup. We want it to be a syrup-like consistency to make it easy to pour onto our bowls. So I'll be checking in with you as this simmers down. You don't want to put a lid on it because you want that moisture to escape. So the couple of hours that it's going to take for this to simmer down will save you time and money from running your dehydrator too long. So I will check back in with you through the course of this simmer until this gets down to the consistency we need for dehydrating. Just checking in so you can see that after about 2 hours, I've lost about 1.5 inches of depth. Slowly but surely, we'll get there. So here is about 3 hours later. We have gone down quite a bit. And we're looking for a syrupy, smooth, well, not quite like sticky syrup, but we're looking for a good syrup consistency for this. So, you know, we've got a little bit to go. All right, we are getting really, really close. What I did at some point is that I actually went through and went ahead and filtered this because I found it was pretty gritty and I wanted to make sure it was out. So I'll pop a photo right here to show you what it looked like when I filtered it. It kind of looks like coffee grounds. So we are now 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 5 hours into it, and we are almost finished. We are down to just the last little bit of liquid. We're not quite at the syrup stage or close to syrup stage. You want it just liquid enough to pour, yet not flow. I hope that makes sense. So we're almost there. Okay, I want you to see this. We are getting so close. See how it's coating the bottom of the pan? And it's still just a little bit liquidy, but it's not quite just straight liquid, but we're getting so close right here. But this is what it's down to after we've spent the day just letting it simmer. We're not doing anything big to it. Set it on a really low temperature after we bring it to that first almost boil, and then just let it simmer for the rest of the day. Not let it get too far gone, but in case you happen not to look and it gets just a little too far, you've got more of a sticky syrup stuck to the bottom of your pan, add a little water, mix it up, let it come back to a liquid consistency, and let it dry again, because I've never done that before, ever. Not ever. So I wouldn't know, but you can do that. All right, so what I'm looking for is just less than this drip. I don't know if you can tell, but what I want is for it to be a little thicker so that when I put it on my dehydrating sheet, it doesn't run, that it still stays a bit of a glob. And we want it to get pretty thin on the sheet. We don't want it to be in a pile. So, you know what? We're going to try that. Let's just see how that works, shall we? Now, let's see if you can see this. Do I have it down to where you can see it with that? Can you see that? Right at the, yeah, right at the edge. About the best I can do right there. All right, we're gonna drip this. Almost looks like taffy, doesn't it? Or, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. But what we want is for it to be a very thin sheet of this syrup. Because any thickness in it makes it last even longer in the dehydrator. So you want minimum effort or minimum time in the dehydrator. So let me get the last of this in there. And I'm going to spread this out just a little bit to help it. Turn the burner off. So it's hard to believe that we've gone from that entire pot full of broth yesterday, that entire stock pot, but this is what we're left with. And it may seem a lot of effort or something that you're not going to get a lot of, but remember what we've done is we have made this into a concentrate that we are going to powder, and then it will only take a teaspoon or so of this powder to get back to 1 to 2 cups of stock to create any dish that you have. We're not trying to save the nutrients from this as if we would be doing fresh. So it's okay to get the temperature for this up to about 145, 140 like you would do a regular fruit leather. It's going to take probably at least 18 hours in your machine to dry. Now that could be, you know, it could be 12, 15, 16 hours. It could be 24, depending on your machine, depending on the humidity in your home. I would suggest if you're going to do this, run it with something else so that you're not running a machine just for this for the full day. I'm going to be doing the last little bit of the vegetables themselves, the leftover vegetables, and giving them another time to dry, a little bit more time to dry. So here we go. Let this thin out just a little bit more. It's already starting to get just a little gummy sitting here, just cooling off. All right, here we go. All right, now if you're the one who wants to do something with these vegetables, if you can see them here, they're all soft, well cooked. Like I said, there won't be a lot of nutrition left in them because that's been transferred over to the broth, but there's the fibers, there's the flavor because it still has some flavor. Not like it would be if it was fresh, but it's there. So if you're wanting to keep this and do something with it, I suggest that you dehydrate the leftover vegetables and make it into vegetable powder. You can add it to anything to flavor it. You can, just add it to your general powder just to beef it up, whatever you need to do, but you can do that. So some options for you are run it through your food processor to mash it up and kind of, you're not going to have a puree, but you're going to have these fine mashed vegetables that you can spread out on your trays. You can use your Vitamix, your blender, whatever blender you happen to have. For some of you, if you don't have that, just go through and take a potato masher, any kind of thing that you have that you can mash with, and just walk through here and mash everything that you can. And when done, not appetizing, but this is what it looks like. So it's all broken down into smaller pieces, and I'm just going to lay these out on my fruit leather trays and get them drying at 125 until it's all nice and crispy and dry. You're going to want to spread these out on trays, spread it well. You don't want to clump it up, and then you're going to want to go through and stir it up every once in a while to break any clumps up that are there to help it dry more efficiently. Okay, so I have my trays, I have my sheets. I'm gonna go ahead and do it this way. Yeah, that one's stained. It's not dirty, so don't worry. I'm also doing this whole thing as if I didn't have a food processor or a blender, for those of you who don't have either. That way we have, you can see how this works for you. But for those of you who have those things, you've got some tools to make this a little easier as far as breaking these vegetables down. Okay, so what I have is, it doesn't look pleasant. It looks like slop, but this is what the leftovers look like when you're all. I'm going to use my hands to just start spreading this out some. What you can do is pieces like this that after you mashed you still didn't get through them all, you can just break them up with your fingers. They break down pretty easily. If you have a piece like this that's just too big and it didn't break down, get some kitchen shears and just cut it. That way you can get it in more manageable pieces, size pieces that will dehydrate better. If this seems a lot of work for something that doesn't have a lot of nutrition to it, it can be. So you just make the choice if this is what you want to do with it after, or compost it, or however you want to manage it. But this is a means of making it last just a little bit longer, so there's a little less waste for those of you who want to try this. So that is what a tray might look like that you're going to put into your dehydrator. It's not perfect, but I will come through and rotate, mix up all the things that are in here to make sure that it all gets some equal time being dry and not touching its neighbors, and getting fully finished. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and load up all 7 trays, and I'll be back with you in just a minute. Are you ready to see the final product? Let's look. So like I said, I gave this about 24 hours to dry. That is my trash tray, the things that were falling through. And there we go. That is our stock. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this about 15 or 20 minutes to cook. Oh, something fell through. Oh, that's when I was checking on it a little while ago. That's just dust from the tray above it. Okay, so I'm going to give this about 15 or 20 minutes to really cool off before I start to try to pry this off the tray. But it's had about 10 minutes sitting here now, and you can see, look at that. That is vegetable stock. That's what you want. You want it to shatter. You want it to be dry enough that it will just crumble and shatter as much as it can. And even just that picking up of it just a little bit cracked it right here. So that's a good thing. We are at go. Okay, then what I want to do is show you what the vegetables look like. This is what they look like. And I tasted a few to see, because we all know that by the time you have simmered this for so long on this stovetop, especially if you've gone like 24 hours with your chicken or your bones, there's no flavor left at all, probably at all. I mean, I've never actually tasted those. But with this vegetable stock, because you only did it for 2 hours, I tasted it. So basically what we've got going on is you've got a mild soup base flavor to almost all the vegetables. I can taste a bit of carrot when I taste the carrot parts. I can taste a bit of celery. The celery is still pretty strong for having cooked that long. When I taste the onion, there's a very mild onion flavor, but it has mostly a vegetable soup kind of flavor. So it's really basically a good soup base, so it'll make a perfect addition to my vegetable powder. We'll get to that next. Okay, so now we have our, and I'm going to apologize for the lighting in here. It just kind of stinks in this corner of my kitchen. We have our veggie stock base. And sorry about the heater just kicking in too. It's cold in Texas today. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start frying this up off of my sheet. And it's going to crack like crazy. It's like little tiny glass shards. And ultimately, that's really what I want. Because I don't want it, this is not leather. You don't want to store this as a leather. You want it in small pieces. Oops, and it's going all over the place. You want it in small pieces. I can get some bigger pieces off, but I wanted this super dry to make sure that there was no moisture left in it whatsoever. I also wanted to show you what these look like. These are, I have 2 quart jars now full of packed veggie stock leftovers. So I put all of them in here and kind of packed it down a little bit to add more. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trays, I believe, of that veggie stock leftover vegetables that I've stuck in both of these jars that we will be powdering in just a minute. All right, all of my shards are broken down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these into my coffee grinder. I'm not using my bullet blender because there's not, well, I probably could, but I'm going to go ahead and just do it with my coffee grinder for right now. it's a smaller amount. Oops, and I'm making a big mess. All right, so this is the coffee grinder I use. It's just a KitchenAid. I like it mostly because it has this removable bowl that makes it easier to clean. Make sure to get all of those shards that I can. Not let any of this go to waste. A little bit of static here. Pull it off the sheet this way. All right, you can see what it looks like inside. So occasionally you're going to see when you're using some of these coffee grinders, you're going to get some of the powder on the outside and it might stick to the inside lid right here. That is what this is for. These machines were not made, they weren't created to do the fine powder of dehydrated goods. They were made to do coffee grounds, which are much thicker, much bigger, which they aren't as, they were just made not to do this. So, I have this little brush that I bought from Hobby Lobby for like $1. It allows me to get into the crevices of anything that I'm working with. This as well as my blenders and my my bullet blender. So all I do is just clean this off and save all that powder. I don't let it go to waste because with this powder you feel like you've gotten nothing, and in fact it is a lot of work for going through what we went through just to get this powder. Now this is what we have left over in here. Now you can see it's already starting to clump a little bit. That is from, you see, that is from the heat of the grinder going through here to grind this up, and we've still got some lumps. So what we're gonna do is just take this in small pulses and just allow it to have time to grind everything up fully, and then we'll do the next step, which is drying the powder. All right, so I'm transferring this to a larger bowl because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back into my oven. I'm going to heat my oven to 150 or 170, the lowest that it goes, and just let it warm up, and then I'm going to turn it off. And then I'm going to put this powder into the oven and let it dry. It's kind of like conditioning that you would do for your vegetables. You want to make sure that any moisture that they get from being in the room, being open, if you didn't get everything completely dry, this is your last chance to do it before you store it. So I'll get that done and we'll be back in. All right, now we're going to be working with our vegetable stock leftovers. My fingers are still a little dirty from the powder. And there you go, vegetable powder. This will just get added to my regular vegetable powder. I'm going to go ahead and run it through the same process that I did with the stock powder to get it in the oven and dry the powder before I go ahead and add it to anything else that I do. But that's how you do that. So once we get back to the stock powder, let's talk about how we use it. Okay, so we have our powder. It's about 1/4 of a cup, maybe 1/3 of a cup of powder left over after we've done all that work. So something that happens even after you've dried it, this stuff will clump a lot because it is hygroscopic, meaning that it will absorb as much moisture from the air that it can possibly absorb because of the sugars from all of the cooked vegetables. So 2 things that you can do, 3 things that you can do. Either store this in a container that's just the right size, that's airtight, to have that there's no moisture and no extra air in the jar. That's always the first thing that you should do with most of your dehydrated goods and powders. Is the jar that you store it in, the volume should be about the same as the volume of food that you have. But of course, I don't have anything that small with this. So my 2 options are, I can add a moisture absorber, or I can add some arrowroot powder. Now this makes, it works like cornstarch or anything else, that it uses, it's a desiccant to help absorb the moisture that's in here and help stop this from clumping. You only want to use about a 1/4 teaspoon to a 1/2 teaspoon at the most if you wanted to use it, and it looks just like this. But remember, when you use this, it works just like any other thickener in a soup. So it might be a little cloudy. Sorry, I'm not getting that centered. It might be a little cloudy, and it might thicken up your base just a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, that's up to you. And if you don't want that, then go ahead and use your moisture absorber inside of your jar. All right, there we go. So the lid that I'm using to make it airtight is, I'm using a regular canning jar, and I have one of these little zinc old canning jar lids that I love to use, so I can get the best of both worlds, where the lid, now of course, now I'm doing it for the camera, it won't go on correctly, but the lid works as the airtight, and the zinc cap just works as something cute. There we go. All right, we have an airtight container. So are you ready to make some stock after I clean up the mess that I just made? Okay, so for about every cup of broth that you want about a teaspoon to a quarter, and a 1/4 to a 1/2, depending on how you want it. It's all really how strong you might like it, how weak you might like it. And you want some really good hot water. About a cup. I didn't put my glasses on. So now we're going to stir it. We want to make sure it is good and dissolved. Pour this into a jar so you can see it a little better. But that, folks, is 1 cup of vegetable broth that has been dehydrated and rehydrated for broth again. Now, this richer color is going to come mostly from how I did my stock and what you put in it. So if you don't put a lot of onion in it and a lot of onion skin in it, it won't be quite as dark. It will change some from just the heating from simmering on the stove all that time. It's going to really refine those sugars into. Now your color will vary no matter what kind of stock that you use. If you use a little bit more powder, it's going to be darker depending on what you put into your broth. Like right now, I think the broth that I started this from has celery, onions, carrots, some parsley, and I don't remember everything else that I put into it, but it really was not a ton of variety of vegetables in this particular one. It was just like a basic recipe. I'll have a recipe down below in the description box, in the iCards above, to my website, where you can download the recipe for making the broth from scratch, and then I'll also have the directions on this in written form for you. But that's it. So don't expect your broth to be dark all the time. Don't expect it to be light all the time. You may have a dark broth, you may have a light one. It doesn't matter. But here is the broth. So you ready to see the end product? Here we go. Here is the vegetable broth. It's a cup of warm broth that I can choose to drink now. I can use to make anything. If I wanted to make more of this, I could have used more powder. But this is not a short process, and I want to warn you about that. So why would you even want to do it? So let's say that you're a hiker or a camper. You want to be able to create meals in bags that you can take with you and just add water and go. This is a stock base that you can use that doesn't require you lugging soup in anywhere. in any fashion, or using a bouillon cube that may have way too much salt for you. So this is, you control the salt. This has no salt. Well, it has a little bit of salt in it. I think I just put a little bit, but you can control the salt completely so that you can salt it at the end for your taste at the end of creating your meal. If you do meals in a jar, if you're putting meals in a jar from dehydrated and dried goods that you want to keep that are just like, pour it in some water, let it simmer on the stove, and you've got a meal already prepped in your pantry. This is a good soup base to start with that as well, so that you're not having to add chicken stock at the end. You don't have to stock for that. Or if you just want to have some emergency powder available to you that you've got ready anytime that you need it when you might be out of stock in the first place. Now, if I wanted to make this a meat stock, when I simmered the original stock, I could have added the bones and things too. But then technically, by the safest standards, it's not shelf stable. It should be stored in your freezer because it's got fat and proteins from the meat. You don't want to store this on your pantry shelf. Okay, it's best stored in the freezer. This is shelf stable on your shelf all the time. And just to give you a quick look at the vegetable powder in the end, you can see what it looks like. Let's see if it'll focus on that instead of on me. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and just powder up the rest of those 2 jars and add it to my regular vegetable powder. I will leave a link to everything in the iCards above and the description box below. It will be a link to the basic how to make vegetable stock recipe so that you can print off that recipe. There will be a link to the canning video that I did last week for Canuary so that you can see how to pressure can the stock for this shelf. There will also be a website, a blog post for that, so you can look at it and print out anything you might want to print out. And it will also have one for the dehydrating post down below as well, or in the iCards, however you'd like it. So that's how it goes. There is your vegetable stock on the shelf, available in a powder form that you can have at any time. So I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any more questions in the comments below. I'll answer all of them, and just ask away. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you've gotten some really good information out of how to preserve vegetable stock. You can either use it and freeze it, you can can it, you can dehydrate it, you can have it available in a lot of formats for you, whatever works best for you and your lifestyle. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.